Well, welcome to this episode of the YAHOWAH blog. I'm your host, Craig Winn. And this program is devoted to the fourth portion of our presentation on YAHOWAH's Choter, an extraordinarily unique circumstance and individual for an extraordinary time. As we recommence in our presentation of the Choter, we'll, of course, return to Yahowah chapter 11, where the whole concept of the Choter is introduced to us. And it is one of the great conundrums, really, of history. This presentation on the Choter, the entire 11th chapter having been devoted to him, was first revealed in around 750 BCE. So well over almost 2,800 years ago. In fact, almost exactly that long ago. And in all that time, no one has ever bothered to say, wow, this is really an exceptional thing. I wonder who this pertains to. You look at Christians, and they will rarely, but sometimes make a dive into the deep end and say, well, that applies to our Christ. That can't, because this fellow's an ordinary guy, apart from their rather extraordinary infusion of the seven spirits. And he is, as a Choter, he is a sucker that gives the fallen stump new life, the stump being that of Israel, which, of course, the Christian Jesus didn't do, or he is a club to be wielded into against the Jewish people's propensity to be religious and political. And of course, the Christian Jesus is credited with creating a new religion, so he couldn't have been God's means of vengeance and punishment, really, against those who are religious and political. So we're just, it can't apply under any circumstance. Plus, what it has the Choter doing, particularly in the last passage we just read, is that this individual is the one who gathers God's people from all around the world and brings them back home. And not only that, he writes the Nesh, which is a sign. The Christian Jesus didn't write anything. And rather than bringing God's people together, the Christian religion is an essential aspect of separating Jews from the land and from their God, and even from being considered human. So, no. And of course, Jews have never made any attempt. Religious Jews have a tough time with the book of Yahowah from beginning to end, because the first 10 chapters of Yahowah are devoted to condemning the Jewish propensity to be religious. So they've got no answer for it. So here we are as an entire chapter of the greatest of the prophets, and it is devoted to this individual who is going to be responsible for calling God's people home, who is going to write this Nesh, a sign that Yahweh himself is going to lift up for his people. And he's going to be blessed with extraordinary wisdom, Chokmah. He is going to have understanding that surpasses all who have gone before him, and bien. He is going to be equated to the greatest of Israelites, because he is going to be a Gabor, strong, bold, capable. He is also someone that Yahweh said, this unique individual is going to be able to put the whole story together, God's plan from beginning to end. And that means that he will explain how the story of Eden is told to us, because God is bringing us back into the garden, and that is the very path that we walk on the Moed Mikre. Pesach opens the door to life, And matzah perfects us, cleaning us up so that we can be around our God. Bikurim brings us into his family and enriches and empowers us. We receive this tenfold enrichment again on Shavuot, where we're transformed into spiritual beings, which makes us immortal and can explore all of this garden, if you will, which is the universe, together with our God. And then Towrah, we have the day of the herald, where this remaining remnant of Yisrael is either gleaned or perfected by the sacrifice of the red heifer, so that we can have Yisrael as the adulterous woman, betrothed again to her king, and Messiah, Dode, upon his return on Kippurim, such that we all return to the garden and camp out with Yahowah, again beginning on Sukkah. So these are very unique qualities. He's going to actually have the spirit of Yahowah, and therefore be a voice that actually speaks on behalf of Yahowah. In fact, it actually says that he will be the voice of Yahowah. And again, you can't have that apply to anybody in Rabbinic Judaism or to Christianity, because there is no Yahowah in Rabbinic Judaism or Christianity. No one speaks for Yahowah. And therefore, you have this exceptional presentation of this phenomenal individual in the last days that is going to do miraculous work on behalf of God's people, enlightening them with all that he has learned through, well, say, books like these behind me, Yada Yahowah. He is going to be the one whose respect and love for Yahowah and his name are going to exemplify him, of which, until we began this project together, there was no one who met that criterion. Of course, there was no one prior to us working together that understood God's plan from beginning to end. No one has had the chokmah, the wisdom, and the bien, understanding, to take the diat, the spirit of diat, this reservoir of knowledge that he was able to build over 23 and a half years, to share thousands of profound insights previously unheralded, so that he could garner Yisrael's attention and teach them as never before, causing them to make that decision to come back home before it is too late. And so this is, again, something that is unlike anything else, and it's presented really as Yisrael moves into the time of Jacob's troubles, and a time, and this is going to be a time where God's people are going to be harassed as never before. I share with you regularly that I spend my mornings on X trying to get Israel's attention, and it is an exceedingly difficult thing to do. In fact, today, one of the people I respect the most on X for representing Yisrael courageously, and I took to task and said, this person has a love affair with Donald Trump. And I had to say, you need to understand where this person is taking you and who this person really is, and wake up to your current reality. Some of the things that I shared, which are essential to protecting Yisrael, to doing this job, is that Israel is proud that it just bought another $30 billion worth of weapons from America last year, mostly in F-35 advanced fighter jets and precision bombs. And I told Yisrael, this spokesperson for Yisrael, that her husband is in the IDF and serves in an intelligence division there, very close to Netanyahu, to have his ear, that the IDF lost this last war because it did not know how to defend Israel from the influx of thousands of jihadists on motor scooters and pickup trucks and on foot. wielding garden tools and AK-47s, knives. And if Israel cannot deal with that, but yet is preparing to fight a war that it will not have to wage again, which is against militaries, which is what these F-35s are for. So it has tanks and it has Apache helicopters and it has F-35s and F-15s, but they're completely useless against what Israel's going to face again. So Israel is building its military for a war that will never be fought, and leaving Jews vulnerable for the one that is inevitable. One of the things that Muslims did on 10/7 is that they proved that they have a strength which can be wielded against Israel's weakness, for which the IDF has no response. And that is because Islam is a death cult and that all Muslims must vow to die killing for Allah. There is no end to the number of individual jihadists, millions of them, that will flood into Israel to kill Jews. And because Jews love life, they will sue for peace. It's very much like the Shalat deal, where for one Israeli returned, Israel didn't just release 1,000 Islamic terrorists, including Sinwar. The cost of Shalat's return was 1,300 Jewish lives on 10/7. And now, having negotiated for the return of most of 250 Jews, by playing the same game again with the devil, negotiating with the devil, Israel will suffer 250 times the onslaught that it experienced on 10/7. 250 times 1,300 lives. And the IDF for 8-10 hours had no clue how to respond to 10/7, still doesn't. And by the weapons they're purchasing, won't be ready 2 years from now when this assault is launched again. But this next time, with 1,000 times the jihadists. And because of the fact that Israel has chosen to trust Donald Trump, I told this, again, it's a woman that I actually respect. She's very articulate and bright, and has a large following on X, one of the largest supporting Israel. And what I told is because you've chosen to trust who you shouldn't trust in Donald Trump, and listed the reasons why she shouldn't, you're going to be blindsided. And Donald Trump is going to sacrifice the heartland of Israel, creating an internal state of terror to secure the petrodollar with Saudi Arabia, now that he has so alienated his relationships with Europe. And in doing so, the 1,000 times the number of jihadists aren't just going to come from one direction. Last time they came from the southwest, but this next time they're going to come from the southwest and the north, and from the coast, from the east, from the southeast. They're going to come from all around. And in addition, now they're going to have the state within, well, less than 2 years, carved out of the heart of Israel, that's going to be a breeding ground for terrorists, where they will attack Israel from the inside out. There's no defense against this. There's no front lines. There's no place to maneuver Apache helicopters or battle tanks or F-15s or F-35s. No amount of bombs are going to work. And this is Israel's fate that I'm trying to mitigate, so that there are more Jews left for a longer period of time, so that there's the opportunity for them to listen to what we have to say as the Choter and return to Yahowah. And I said, okay, why would you trust somebody that deployed a completely incompetent man in Witkoff because he was a golfing buddy who was owned and operated, bribed by the Qataris, who are the ATM for Islamic terrorism against Israel worldwide. They paid him off with $623 million. And you deploy him as your negotiator, and the first thing he does is that statement that we all hell to pay, if all the hostages aren't released. Well, the hostages weren't all released, and the one that had to pay hell was Israel capitulating to the devil once again. They were strong-armed into sacrificing ever more Islamic terrorists to get a handful of Jews back, some in coffins. And then he's the same man that says we're going to turn Gaza into resorts. What a imbecilic thing to say. And that we're going to build emerald cities for Palestinians to live free and happy, fulfilling lives in the Sinai and in Jordan. Oh, good God. All you were going to do for these malcontent Muslims is make certain that no one can thwart the number of weapons at their disposal. I mean, it's the dumbest idea in the history of dumb ideas. And then he tells Israel, setting a trap that Israel is suicidally painting themselves in a corner with their own blood, that here's all the bombs you could possibly want. I don't care what you do to Gaza. And you got Netanyahu having promised, I'm going to wipe Hamas out. And so far, all he's done is make them more potent. Turn the entire world against you. I understand your rage. But you fought this war in a way that has caused greater pain and suffering. And you've turned the entire world against you in the process. And now Trump says, oh, here's some more bombs. Go do some more of that. After the UN stupidly has already condemned you of genocide. And now they're giving you the opportunity to do more. And you're going to take the bait, make a bad situation even worse. Are you absolutely crazy? Because what's going to happen when it gets to be so bad that Israel now is a liability, and it's a liability to a narcissist who only cares about one thing, himself, and has no empathy? What is he going to sacrifice to get what he wants? Israel. It's obvious. But beyond all of that, the prophets have all said so. This is what we find in Yeshaya 17 and 18, that it is America that is sacrificing Israel, thinning the country at the waist such that it becomes indefensible, coterminous with the Shabuah harvest, which is May 22nd, 2026, 7 years prior to Yahweh's return, with Dod, the Messiah, on Kippurim in 2033. And so we know who the culprit is. We know when this is going to happen. We know how it's going to happen. And right after that, we're told that by 3 prophets, that there will be this unmitigated flood of terrorists into Israel, such that even Wookiee says, I'm going to stand guard now. This sounds serious. So that there's nothing that can be done to stem this flood. I mean, have you ever watched a tsunami? You can't send a military after a tsunami. You could fire every bullet in the world and you're not going to stop it. This is what they've said. And it talks about Jewish lives being ravaged, and God can't intervene to stop it. And the reason he cannot intervene is because you've denied him. You told him to shut up and go away. You erased his name. You wrote him out of your lives. And so God can't intervene on behalf of people that don't know him. It is only once we have awakened enough people to make a genuine difference so that there are enough people for Yahweh and Do to return to who will acknowledge them by name and appreciate what they have done, that Yahweh can intervene and will finally intervene to stop all this nonsense. But by that time, the planet's going to be involved in world war. And so it is into this time that Yahweh says, I have a solution. And my solution is the Choter. And so you, in these first three programs, and now this being the fourth, you are listening to God speak about his Choter, about the one that he has chosen and equipped to speak to you at this time, and whose message is going to be hugely beyond, miraculously beyond, supernaturally beyond what anyone else has ever thought, learned, or shared in all of human history. This is what you are being offered, Israel. And my wife and I talked a bit about this yesterday when I was talking about the fact that in a program we were sharing regarding the Shabuah harvest, and Yahweh talked about what he was going to offer the Choter as a reward for seeing this through, for devoting what will be 32 years every waking hour to this cause, and having the tough duty of having to challenge exceedingly hard-headed and the Israelites who are just unwilling to listen, who can be exceedingly belligerent, even in the face of what will be a near-death experience. And so he says, you're going to get this wonderful reward. And of course, I'm not doing this for the reward. I'm doing this because this is something Yahweh wants, and I want what he wants. And he wants his people to come home. So I want his people to come home. But this should not have been my job. Should have been your job, Israel. But he couldn't find a single one of you who knew him, who would listen to him, who would do as he asked. Not one of you. You all play along like he's the God of Israel. Well, he once was, but you told him to go away. And so I was given the job that should have been yours. And it's staggering how long you've been antagonistic towards Yahweh. And the story of the Exodus is just one hideous, vomiting, disgusting episode after another. You were abysmal. And I'm not sure it's gotten any better. And so this is really your last chance. You need to listen to what God is conveying through this individual. God's giving it his all. He's all in, 7 spirits in this one man to get your attention so that you will come home. So you'll accept him again as your God, as Yahweh, and that you'll embrace Dod, his beloved son, your Messiah, the returning king, who fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim so that you might live. So the last passage that we read in our previous program on the Choter is as follows. So it will happen in that day during his time, my upright one, the upright pillar of my tabernacle, of the restoring witness, will once again associate his hand yet another time, a second time, I'm going to come back after the end of this life and return to Israel, this time with an accomplice, with Elia, to reacquire, to bring forth, and to redeem the remnant of God's family who remain. And that's quite a story, because not only are we writing this Nesh and broadcasting, that's all these books behind me, and broadcasting the YAHOWAH blog, sharing this directly with you to reacquaint you with YAHOWAH and to bring you out of the various places around the world where you live. And of course, for those who don't currently live in Israel, the overwhelming majority of those would be in the United States, which is, I'm sure, why YAHOWAH chose someone who speaks English. It's the language spoken by more Jews than any other worldwide by a considerable margin. That this Choter, as we have heard throughout Yashaya, is the Parah. He's the productive and fruitful bull. He is the Adamah Parah, this bloody red man of the earth who is fruitful and productive and will serve as the bull, because as the Adamah Parah, which is thought to be the red heifer, he is going to prepare this remnant of Israel for Yahweh's return with Dod, serving the final remnant of his people. This once again affirms, because it's the final remnant of his people, that this is speaking of someone today. We're only 14 months away from the time of Jacob's troubles and less than a year and a half away from Yahweh's return. So this continues. So he will lift up the Nesh sign, the signal, the banner, the means to garner Israel's attention from every ethnicity and every language, for every ethnicity and all nations, for all places and races around the world. Then he will gather together and remove the strayed and scattered of Israel. So this message YAHOWAH is explaining is going to be broadcast, if you will, to every place on earth. Well, we have a little bit of a challenge here. Let me address that. My Wookiee decided to use the keyboard as a headrest, and so he has added to the Nesh. Always willing to contribute. So you have this banner that whether it be the YAHOWAH blog or the series of books that you find that are free at yadayah.com, that is going to be conveyed throughout the world, throughout all nations, among all ethnicities. That does not mean necessarily that Goyim are going to have the first, in fact, it certainly doesn't mean that Goyim are going to have the first crack at capitalizing on what the Choter is revealing. Well, they can, so long as they integrate themselves with Yisrael and accept the same terms and conditions as presented throughout the Torah, they can. But the primary meaning for lifting up this banner among every ethnicity and nation is so that YAHOWAH can gather his people home. The people that are holding him must have both sides of what the Choter represents conveyed to them. Both the club, which is akin to the 13 books I have written denouncing Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and what I do on social media, which is to renounce progressive politics and conspiratorial theories, as well as the MAGAites for being destructive to God's people. So putting them on notice while protecting Yisrael and while encouraging Yisrael to return to God. That is precisely what we're doing. So you're witnessing the very fulfillment of this at this time. Because the purpose of communicating to the world, and X is the world's newspaper, I think that Facebook has become the world's community. And YouTube is the world's reservoir for video content. And so we've used them all and the internet with the YAHOWAH.com site to be the bookshelf for all of the knowledge that is contained and shared in these books behind me. So that we're broadcasting a message to the entire world, available to all of the 8 billion people equipped with smartphones and laptops and tablets and personal computers, so that collectively we can use them all to cause the strained and scattered of Yisrael to come home. Those banished during the diaspora, the Nadach, those who were expelled and forced to live in another place. It's time to come home. And the dispersed of Yahudah, he will gather up and obtain from the extremities of the earth. The difference in the Dead Sea Scrolls amongst whether it says 4 extremities of the earth or simply extremities of the earth. I'm not sure it makes much difference either way. But you can tell Yahweh's interest remains his people. And that means this notion that there was a replacement, as Christianity requires, of substituting Goyim for Yisrael and their church for Jews, is utter nonsense. Well, first of all, it had not a single supportive statement anywhere in the Torah and prophets, and there were thousands of statements in the Torah and prophets that negate it, but that never stopped the religious from being foolish. That's why I call it replacement foolology. God's interest is to gather the strained and the scattered who were banished of the diaspora of Yisrael, and the dispersed, those who have strayed away from home of Yahudah. And that we are working collaboratively to gather up and obtain them from everywhere around the world, recognizing that more than 80% of the Israelites currently living outside of Yisrael are in the United States. And when you add Canada to that, it's even a higher percentage. That is the goal. But it's more than that, of course, because of the 7.4 million Israelites in Israel, there aren't even a tiny fraction of 1% that have come home. Because home isn't about geography. It's about relationship. God is calling his people home to be part of the family that he offered to Abraham, Yishak, and Jacob, the covenant family. And there probably aren't at this moment 10 Israelites that are actually part of that covenant family. So we have a lot of work to do to call more Israelites within Yisrael home. That's a tough audience. Fortunately, there are hundreds upon hundreds, maybe thousands of Israelites in the United States and in Europe, that, and in South America as well, that are listening and have come home. This was Yashayah, Liberation and Salvation are from Yah, 11:12. So this is the greatest of all opportunities to serve Yahweh, perhaps on behalf of all ethnicities, but The intent is to rescue the chosen people, Yisrael and Yahudim, from the ethnicities. For every waking moment, as I have shared for the past now 24 years, I have collaborated on this quest to bring Yehudim home, to Kabatz, to gather God's people from the extremities of the earth. Those who have sought to know Yahweh through the revelations of his Choter, the insights that the seven spirits provided to the Choter, will spend eternity exploring the universe along with the entire covenant family. And yet, after each new adventure, we're going to return home to rest and reflect upon what we have discovered along the way. The proximity of these prophecies regarding the Choter to the pronouncement proclaiming the revival of Yisrael and Yehudah from these Gentile nations strongly infers that this invitation to return to Yahweh is being offered through the Choter. This is his purpose. Therefore, it would be a very, very bad idea to interfere with God's mission through him or to get in his way by attempting to forestall the movement of his children or the witness of Yahweh's herald. The last portion of this announcement affirms that rather than offering to relocate 97% of Israelites and Yehudim, God will be providing every wayward child an express ticket home. As for Goyim, he is not offering anything beyond what he has already provided, which is the opportunity to observe his Torah, attend his mikveh, participate in his bereth, while embracing Yisrael, other than to provide the religious and political with yet another warning and rebuke. That will be the primary purpose of the banner at this time in these places. In other words, the Choter's banner, raised by Yahweh, is going to rebuke the ways of the Gentiles. It's something that I spend enormous parts of my time doing now, exposing and condemning their religions, their governments, their militaries. Oh my God, when you consider the ineptness of humankind. I've written extensively and shared on Facebook and on X the history of the Ukrainian war. It's a proxy war with Russia, and how the United States, going all the way back to 2008 with the Bush administration, ignited this flame by stating bluntly that the Ukraine would be part of NATO, which is to weaponize the Ukraine and to turn it against Russia on our border, which of course is unacceptable to any country, including Russia. It would have been unacceptable to the United States. Those are fighting words. And then the United States made it even worse because to achieve this, the United States overthrew the popularly elected government of Ukraine and replaced it with one of the United States choosing. And neither of these things are speculation. The proof of them is ubiquitous. And then if that were not bad enough, 5 years before the war began, two U.S. senators, John McCain and Lindsey Graham, went to Ukraine, met with the new replacement government and with the military leadership, and said, our fight will be your fight. That you'll take it to Russia. We'll begin in the Donbass region, and we will arm you for as long as it takes. We declared war on Russia. It wasn't the other way around. And then you move through the Biden administration, and he essentially declares war on Russia, and rather than negotiating to stop the war and precluding their involvement in NATO and the weaponizing of Ukraine and the continued expansion of NATO right up to Russia's borders. He says, damn the torpedoes. Starts condemning Russia, puts sanctions on Russia, blows up the Nord Stream pipeline. And then once the war starts, blames Russia, condemns Russia. It's like there's giggles around Europe and the United States if you make Russia to be the boogeyman. Like there's this inbred fright of the Russians that you could capitalize on, tell any manner of campfire story, and the people will believe it. Then when the war turned really nasty, a peace treaty was negotiated. It was ready to be signed by both parties. It said exactly what Putin said in the immediate aftermath of the farce charade, which I'll talk about in a moment. And it basically said that we agree to terms the war will be over. But Boris Johnson and Joe Biden said, no, it won't be over, and told the Ukraine to continue to fight and supplied ever more weapons. And since that time in 2002, 2 million people have died. $500 billion has been squandered. And then Donald Trump says, I'm going to come to office. I'm going to end that war. And he says, I'm going to end it by curtailing weapons supplied to Ukraine. And what's the first thing he does? And by the way, and negotiating with Russia, well, he gets all demeaned in the media for being the darling of Russia. So he has to turn on Russia because he can't handle criticism. He's a narcissist. He rearms Russia. He rearms Ukraine, provides targeting data again to Ukraine so they can kill Russians. Then he goes off to Saudi Arabia, of all godforsaken places, the home of the ultimate psychotic narcissist, the very country that bred the plot of 9/11. He goes there, of all places, and has this charade and comes up with this peace plan that didn't even involve Russia in the negotiations, and claims that if Russia doesn't accept his plan, which was utter nonsense, that he was going to sanction them some more. It's just astonishing what you see. And then today we hear NATO announce that Ukraine will never be part of NATO, which is to say, go back to 2008 and 2 million lives lost and $500 billion squandered. And oh, by the way, we're just kidding about that NATO thing. Are we out of our ever-loving minds? I mean, humankind is become astonishingly ignorant, irrational, and immoral. And all the while, you've got people who are communists and socialists partnering with the most regressive, sexist, deadly, fascist religion in human history. As if they're out of their minds and they can't think. And it's a really, really screwed up world out there. And all I can say is that, yes, the prophets told us this was going to happen at this time and in this way. And we're witnessing the fulfillment of everything they had to say. And still no one is listening, even Jews. Yahowah's solution is the Choter, to explain all of this to you so that you might be prepared, so that you're not caught up in the carnage. So this banner is being lifted up, exposing and condemning religions, governments, militaries, because God intends to leave everyone without excuse, and he wants to give his people substance, a reason to trust, a reason to come home. Now, this is the last call before the curtain drops. Yahowah is inviting his people to come home before the final act. And among them, there will be some receptive Gentiles, but this is a call to honor the promise Yahowah made to Abraham, to Yishak, and to Jacob long ago. It's interesting, too, that what most people don't recognize is that all of the initial characters in God's stories were Goyim. Adam, Towrah, Noah and his sons, all Goyim. Abraham, Sarah, Lot, they were all Goyim. The first son of the covenant was a child between two Babylonians, Abraham and Sarah. So he was Babylonian. And then they go up where the descendants who had come with Abraham and Sarah on their journey, they go back to Haran. They find wives and they produce more Babylonians. And it's finally after Jacob has kids that those children are named Israelites. But up to that point, there hasn't been a Israelite. It's all been Goyim. And so God's concluding his witness to humankind by coming full circle with the Goyim, just as he is coming full circle on taking us right back to the garden that we once enjoyed. And so if you're listening, if you're responsive, then you can be among those who avail themselves of the Bereth covenant at this late hour. And as a result of listening to the YAHOWAH blog, reading these books, responding to what you learn, come to know and understand, you can be part of God's covenant family, live forever with him, and do something else if you do it soon enough. Join us. I cannot ever partner with somebody that's overtly political or overtly religious, no matter if we share the same enemy. But as I say, I do reach out to those that I meet on Facebook and X in hopes that there is a secular individual who is not overtly political or religious, that has a standing within the community that will join us, and that we can reach more people as a result of this. But so far, such individuals have been so few and far between. They reminds me of what Yahweh said through Yashayah. I looked and I looked to find someone with whom I could work, and there was no one. This is all really very poignant. It provides a wonderful contrast to the time when Yahweh opened heaven's door and the great prophet Yashayah lamented because there was no one prepared to enter. Fortunately, Yisrael's story was far from over at that time. For the solace of his prophet and the benefit of his people, Yahweh has revealed how, in what was then a very different place and time, an implement described as the Choter, the secondary branch that gives new life to the fallen stump that is Yisrael, bringing growth to this neglected rootstock, and also serving as the club of divine judgment, would be enlightened and emboldened by Yahweh's seven spirits, such that his words would resonate with Yisrael and Yehudim in the end. And folks, it may be right at the bitter end. I don't know how many Yehudim and Israelites are going to accept Dod as the Messiah and the Son of God, the one who fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Makodim, or re-embrace Yahweh by name, understand the conditions of the covenant and accept them, appreciate the purpose of the Moed Mikre and capitalize upon them prior to Shabuah in 2026. And I don't know how many we're going to convince when Elia and I return to Jerusalem and stand upon the Temple Mount and speak to God's people between 2030 and 2033 that will avail themselves of the Towrah Lakot gleaning of Israelites, or how many the final remnant will be within Israel that the sacrifice of the red heifer will prepare. But we will continue such that we do everything on our part to make that number, and mostly that the quality of individual that listens and responds meet Yahweh's expectations, if not exceed them. That is our intent, and we're going to stay the course until we have achieved that result. So with much greater spiritual input than anyone has ever previously experienced, among the participants and contributors to the covenant, the Choter, as the sucker growing out of the fallen stump of Yisrael, as the club being wielded as a divine implement of justice, has composed a Nesh and is the YAHOWAH blog to reach God's people. This is a collaborative effort such that the harvests will be as prolific as possible, and that the remnant of God's people will be receptive, and that there will be a marvelous homecoming and a wonderful family reunion. It is why we're here. Yahowah's salvation has lived up to his name, and he is the textbook that we are reading such that we can acclaim Dod's return as he comes to center stage. There will be a marvelous celebration. Yisrael's homecoming on Yom Kippurim will occur as planned. Yahweh will be pleased with the result. He has worked so diligently through the Choter to orchestrate, and all will be right with the world, as Yahweh acknowledged through his people, and Dod has finally come to be appreciated for all he has done to bring us home. Soon, there will be thousands gleefully dancing through Passover's door. The great prophet Yeshayah will be redeemed. Dod will be singing again. And so I thank you for listening. We'll return in our pursuit of the man from Edom and how this is directly related to the Choter, because they are one and the same, and how this individual, according to the great prophet, is the one who saves many in the end. Again, unlike any who have lived previously, he exists to save God's people. And so I thank you for listening to this episode 4 on the Choter, and we will resume probably with a separate series, but on the same topic, with part 1 on the man from Edom in our next program. Thank you for listening. This is Craig Winn, and this has been an episode of the YAHOWAH blog.